Hey guys, welcome to Rooted Music. My name is Alex, and this is part 2 of a little series that we're doing just to give you some rudimentary, fundamental basics of understanding every note up and down the neck of the guitar and scales and numbers. And in this video, in particular, we're going to discuss chords and chord structure and the number system. So if anything, as we're starting to talk, kind of feels like you're missing something, just go back and watch part 1 and that'll help bring you up to speed. So diving into chord structure, every chord is really a triad, which is basically, tri meaning 3, is just a combination of 3 notes. Okay, and then at the most basic level, those fall into 2 categories, major and minor. You've heard of major and minor chords. Well, these are major and minor triads. It's just those 3 notes. And if we were to pick the key of C, just because it has no sharps or flats, and you can see on your screen the PDF of the C major scale, and we said, well, we know that starts right up here on the 8th fret of the 6th string, and we said, well, let's walk through the key of C and let's build some chords using the knowledge of major and minor triads. Now, a major triad is going to have a major third at the beginning of it, which means that between the 1 and the 3, there's 2 whole steps. A minor is just going to take that third and flat it or lower it a half step, so you'd have a whole step and then a half step in between the first and the second note of the chord, or the 1 and the 3. And the triad is really, to take your mind off the PDF for a second, if you were thinking through a major scale like linearly, and it was just the C, the D, the E, F, G, A, B, like this. Well, think of a triad as the 1, the 3, and the 5. And if you think through the key of C, it's the 1 is a C, the 3 is an E, and the 5 is a G. Well, in a C chord, those are the notes that you're going to find in a C major chord. And if you take them straight out of the scale, out of the major scale, and you start on the C, then you happen to build a C major triad when you start on C. And so you can even see that back on the PDF. When you walk through the scale, if you pick the first note, and then the 3rd note of the scale, and then the 5th note of the scale, so 1, 3, and 5 make up the major triad, or make up a triad. It's C, E, and G. Well, if you go down here and you play a C chord, which you know your C chord shape, and you look through each one of these notes, those are the notes that you're finding repeated throughout this chord. So in the key of C, if you were to build a chord based upon the 1 of the key of C, it's going to come out as a major chord or a major triad. If you were to want to pick another note, say the 6 of the key of C, which if we count through, or even if we look at our PDF, we count through the major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A would be the 6th note of the major scale, of the C major scale. So A would be the 6 in the C major scale. So I said to you, let's build a triad starting on the 6th note of the major scale. And in the key of C, that would be A. Well, then you would start on A as the first note of the chord, and then you would pick the 1, 3, and the 5 starting on A. And if you stay in the key of C, another way to think about this that might simplify it is to just pick every other note. You just skip one in between. Okay, so it's 1, 3, 5, but you're skipping 2 and 4. So it's just every other note. So if you start on 6, you're playing the 6, and then you're not playing the 7th, but you're playing the 8, which is really the octave, so it's the 1 again. And then you're skipping the 2 and playing the 3. So to build the chord that would be starting on the 6th note of the C major scale, you start on A right there because you know your pattern. And you know an A would be in it, B would not, C would be in it because it's every other note. And so that would be the 3rd in this chord. So this would be the 1 in this chord, the 3rd note of the chord. and then not D, but E would be in it because every other note. This would be the fifth note of the chord, or the fifth of the chord. So the 1, the 3, and the 5. And those notes make up an A minor chord. That's a minor triad because instead of it being 2 whole steps to get from the first note to the second note of the chord or the third of the chord, it's actually a whole step and a half step. So that's a minor third. This would be a major third. This is a minor third. So all that's neither here nor there. It's just really knowing that in that chord is an A, a C, and an E. Well, if you go down here and you play the A minor chord, those are all the notes that you're going to see repeated throughout this chord. And that lets you know that, well, if I'm playing a note, or if I'm playing a chord built off of the 6th note of the scale, it always comes out to be a minor chord. And the way that, for my brain, this is the way I think about it. If I'm staying in the major scale and building the chord, that's what it's always going to come out to be. So if I build the chord on the 1, 3, 5 of the major scale, it's always going to come out to be a major chord. So the 1 chord of the key of C would be C major. The 6th chord, like we just played, would always be A minor. So if I'm communicating in numbers and I say the 1 chord, but I say we're in the key of C, then I'm saying play a C major. If I'm saying play the 6th chord, you're automatically going to think the 6th of the key of C is A, and the 6th chord is always a minor chord, so I'm going to play an A minor. Now, let's back up and walk through the rest of the scale as well. So, if we take that knowledge and we come back to the C major scale and we build chords off of another note, because we just did one off the C, which is the 1 of the key of C, and we built a chord starting on the 6 of the key of C, and that came out to be minor. The one built off the 1 came out to be major, as long as we stayed in the major scale. Now let's build one on the 2. So the 2 of the key of C is a D. If you're looking at your PDF there, you can see the 2 of the major scale, and the key of C is going to be a D. Now, if you pick every other note from the scale, starting with D, and you don't play the next note, but you pick the next one, it's going to be F. And then you don't play the G, but you play the A. So you have D, F, A. Well, those happen to be the notes that make up a D minor triad. So the 2 of any major scale, if you build a chord off of that note, is always going to come out as a minor chord. So if you're in the key of C and I said, play me a 2, you're going to play a D minor chord. Because the chord that you build starting on the 2, or the D in the key of C, comes out to be D, F, A. And if you look through a D minor chord, those are the notes that you find repeated throughout. So that's a 1 chord is always going to be a major chord. 2 chord's always going to be a minor chord. And let's say you built a chord starting on the 3rd note of the scale. Well, in the key of C, that's an E, and then you just get every other note, or 1, 3, 5, starting with the 3rd. So the 1 is E, then you're going to skip the F, and you're going to keep walking through your PDF there. The next note up is G, so you have E, G, and those 2 are in the chord. Then you're going to skip the note after G, but you're going to catch the B, and that's going to be the 5th of the chord. So the 1, 3, 5. So it's going to be E, G, and B are what make up the chord that's built on the 3rd note of the scale. Well, that happens to come out to be a minor triad starting with E. So that makes it an E minor chord, which, if I'm in the key of C, the 3 chord is going to be E minor. Or in any key, the 3 chord will always be a minor. So you're starting to pick up on some things here. The 1 chord is always a major, no matter what key you're in. The 2 chord is always a minor, no matter what key you're in. The 3 chord is always a minor, no matter what key you're in. And now the 4 chord, we're going to build a chord starting on note 4 of the scale, which go back to your PDF. You'll see that's the 8th fret of the 5th string, and that's a F, right? So in the key of C, the 4 is F. So we're going to pick every other note starting on that F. So F, then not G, but A. Then we'll skip B, and we'll grab C. So we have F, A, C. And you can probably hear that's a major triad, because there was a whole step and another whole step between note 1 and note 3. So that's a major third. And that happens to be the F major chord. So in the key of C, the 4 chord is F major, because it's built off the 4th note of the key of C, which is F. 1, 2, 3, 4, C, D, E, F. And then you're also picking every other note to make up the chord, and you came up with F, A, C. And those are all the notes that are repeated through an F major chord if you look through an F major chord. So the 4 chord in any key is always going to be a major chord. Now if we go to the 5 of the key of C, which is going to be a G. So we're going up through our scale on our PDF. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th note is a G. Now we're going to grab every other note, and we're going to build a chord or a triad starting with G. So G, we're not going to play the A, we're going to play the B. And that's actually a major triad right there, because there's 2 whole steps to get to that B from the G. So G, A, B. And then we'll skip C, and then we play D. So that gives us a G major triad. So if we start on the 5th note of any major scale and build a triad, it comes out to be a major triad. And in the key of C, the 5th note is G, so that comes out to be a G major triad. And those are all the notes, G, B, D, that you would see in a G chord if you came down here and played your basic cowboy G chord there. So the 5 chord in any key is going to always be a major chord. And we already discussed the 6th chord, starting on the 6th note, is always a minor chord, because we came up with A minor when we picked every other note in the scale. A, C, E. And then we can explain this, but if you were to pick every other note starting on the 7, you would have what's called a diminished chord. And so in the key of C, that would be B diminished, and you play it kind of like this. It's a minor flat 5. We don't really have to get into that. You're probably never going to play that. What you probably would end up playing is a 5/7 or a 5 chord, which in this case, if we back up, our 5 chord, this will require some thought here. Our 5 chord is going to be G in the key of C. But we're going to put the 7 of the key, which we're in the key of C, so the 7 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That note's a B, as you can see on your PDF. Now we're going to put a B in the bottom of our G chord. So a 5 chord would be G, but we want to put a B in the bottom of that. And armed with our knowledge that we learned in the previous video of all the notes up and down the neck of the guitar, we can find a B right there. So that's how you play a 5/7 or a G over B. And what that, it looks like a fraction, but what it's really saying is this is the chord up here, but down here we're putting this in the base of the chord or in the bottom of the chord. And they're just wanting this note in the lower register of the chord. That's what they're wanting to hear, that movement. So you oftentimes, again, in the key of C, would not play a B minor flat 5 or a B diminished. You would play a G with a B in the bass. So that's the key of C. So now that we know that, if we were to take that same knowledge and say, okay, well that was the key of C, but I want to move it to the key of G. This is where the numbers come in so handy, okay? you don't have to think anymore like, wait a minute, okay, what's all the chords in this song? If I just said, well, the song is 1, 4, 5, okay, then if we were in the key of C, you learned that the 1 chord is C, the 4 chord is F major, the 5 chord is G, okay? F major and then G, okay? Well, let's say I moved the song to G because someone else is singing the song and they need it in a different key. And I said, well, it's 1, 4, 5. Well, you know that, forget whether it's the key of G or the key of R at this point. You're thinking in numbers, and you know that in a major key, the 1 is always going to be a major chord, the 4 is always going to be a major chord, and the 5 is always going to be a major chord. And the 2 and the 3 and the 6 are always going to be your minor chords, right? So if I say it's 1, 4, 5, and you're in the key of G, the 1 chord in the key of G will be G major, correct. But if I say the 4 chord, then I'm wanting you to play the chord that's built off the 4 of the key of G. Well, you just have to maybe take your major scale pattern and move it to the key of G right here. And you start on G and you can count up 1, 2, 3, 4. And you know that note's a C. So the 4 in the key of G is a C. So what chord do you have to play if you're in the key of G and I say play a 4 chord? Well, you know it's going to be built off the C. And you know the 4 chord is always major. So it's C major. So if I say the song is 1 to 4, it's G to C, G to C. If I say that then play a 5, well, you know that in the key of G, the 5 is a D because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know that the 5 chord is always major, so it's going to be a D major. And so what I'm wanting you to play then, if I say play 1, 4, 5, but we're in the key of G, I'm wanting you to play a G, a C, and then a D. And then if I say play a 6 chord, well, the 5 is a D. I know in the key of G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's an E. So I need to play an E minor because the 6 chord's always a minor. The 2, the 3, and the 6 are always minor. The 1, the 4, and the 5 are always major. So the 6th chord will be E minor in the key of G. If I said give me the 2 minor in the key of G, well, you know the 1 is G, and then you know a whole step up from that is your 2, which is A, so okay. The 2 is an A, so the 2 chord is always going to be a minor, so I'll play an A minor. If I say give me the 3 chord, well, you would know, okay, the 3rd note of the G major scale is a B, and the 3 chord is always a minor, so B minor. Again, your 2 chord is always a minor, your 3 chord is always a minor, your 6 chord is always a minor, unless otherwise communicated. And your 1 chord and your 4 chord and your 5 chord are always major. So see, pretty quickly, you've lost you don't need to necessarily communicate in actual note names or chord names anymore. You can just say the numbers, and quickly you're able to move it around to different keys. Armed with all that knowledge that we've covered in the first of these 2 videos of chromatic scale, major scale, learning the fretboard up and down, and learning about numbers, and now chord structure and major and minor triads, and the Nashville Number System. Hopefully this all helps you, especially as we move forward and walk through some of our other tutorials. You'll be able to quickly just understand what we're talking about as we kind of leave some of the chord names behind and just communicate in numbers. So I think this is all going to help you as you play with other people as well. So hope you enjoy it.